Sunday, but I was just feeling the itch. I was feeling those downloads coming through pretty strong. So I just wanted to push it up so I can talk about this as soon as possible. So today we are going to be talking about what women lost when darkness was demonized. And specifically, what we're talking about is we're talking about the dark aspect of the feminine, especially when it pertains to culture, spirituality, and of course, archetypes that exist within us and collectively. I will tie this in to my upcoming ebook, which is the Dark Feminine Codex Rituals to Activate Siren, Succubus, and Vampire DNA. Okay. Now, I want to be clear about what feminine energy is and isn't when it comes to the darkness that was lost. Feminine energy in her wholeness is much different than the version of femininity that we see today. And this has to do with centuries of repression, centuries of reprogramming, centuries of cultural rewrites of his story. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the concept of the patriarchy. I'm all blah blah. The concept of the patriarchy, but I am going to touch on it occasionally. As it exists today, we're in a world that honors masculine hustle, masculine force, masculine marketing, masculine lifestyle. Everything is really geared toward men. This is a man's world, as the saying goes, but it wouldn't be anything without a woman or a girl, right? This is true. But the problem is because it's a man's world, there often isn't space for the feminine to thrive in the way that she could. So, what I want to talk about is how reclaiming the darkness that was lost, and we're going to get into what exactly was lost, will empower us into that wholeness of divine feminine embodiment. So, it goes deep, guys, as deep as even the way the calendar is nowadays, the way the work days are created. Everything is very solar, which in most cultures is masculine energy. Okay, solar is light, it's the conscious mind, it's action, it's being proactive, it's shining, it's that stellar solar energy, which is very masculine energy. Okay, and this is what most calendars are based off of nowadays. So while we acknowledge the moon, which is the Luna, which is the feminine, which this is why women's cycles are synced to the moon. They're synced to the waves of the sea because this is feminine energy. And feminine energy has a slower cycle. We're geared toward 30-day months. We're geared toward a more slow build of receptivity. So when the moon is waning, we're meant to kind of go within. Most of us, I'm going to get into why that's different for different women. And when the moon is waxing, we're meant to more so shine. Okay. And the lunar calendar that used to exist was 13 months. 13 became a number that was demonized. Why? And I've talked about this on my other channel. So if you guys never heard of my previous channel that I had, um, definitely check it out. I will drop that link in the comment section below. I no longer have access to it, but there's a lot of cool stuff on there. That being said, the number 13 was demonized because it was associated with the divine feminine, specifically the dark divine feminine, the womb, the dark mother. What do you think we get the term matrix from? Maternal. Anything that starts with mat, maternal. Okay. So the whole energy of the 13 is the divine feminine power of the void or the womb. So, what did they do? They took it from being the most lucky number, it being associated with the 13 lunar cycles of the year, it being associated with the divine feminine, it be associated with like dark Venus currents as well. And they took that and they demonized it, turned it into something unlucky or evil, even to the point. This is how superstitious folks are, even to the point where to today, I challenge you to find a hotel that has a 13th fucking floor. At least in the US, I don't know of a hotel that has a 13th floor. Okay. This is for a reason. People so believed that it was so unlucky that they didn't want to even book a room in the hotel of a 13th floor. Okay. This is a very powerful number because the womb, the void, is the potential for creation itself. So, one of the things we lost was our rhythm, our feminine rhythm, and being able to honor that feminine rhythm when it comes to conducting ourselves. We were the oracles, we were the midwives, we were the medicine women, we were the doctors, we were the shamans. Okay. We were the sacred prostitutes, we were the high priestesses. We had that type of power, and people began to fear that power. And in fearing that power, then we began to be slowly indoctrinated to think that anything associated with the feminine, specifically dealing with the dark divine feminine, anything that had to do with power, sovereignty, sexuality, spirituality, that part was demonized. The only thing left was what was palatable. So all of the strong, powerful witches and midwives and medicine men and women, they were hunted down and killed. Their whole systems of worship were dismantled. The matriarchy itself and how the matriarchy used to exist thousands and thousands of years ago was dismantled. Now, there are some small cultures today where there's remnants of that. I'm not saying it doesn't just not exist anywhere, but for the most part, that was dismantled. Do you see prominent temples of worship for goddesses? No, you don't. There are some areas of the world, like, for example, India, some areas in, like, specifically the Asian part of the world that still have some of that. Okay. And I did travel to India and I did witness this firsthand. But for the most part, I mean, that was worldwide. For the most part, the dark divine feminine, all of the original goddesses, which of course are archetypes attributed to the power of the feminine in the flesh and in a collective sense, all of those were either turned into saints or they were turned into demons. And remember, I've talked about this before. The name demon goes back to daemon in the Greek, and it actually means power or guardian. This was totally flipped around. This is why I used to say that whatever you're told to do, just do the opposite of that because everything has been inverted. So, many people confuse dark feminine energy with masculinity. They are two separate energies, and I'm going to explain what that means. Masculine energy is about a container, okay? We all contain both, by the way. I don't care what sex, gender, whatever you want to call yourself, I don't care. We all contain both. But the masculine energy is the container. This is the system of order. This is what holds a world or a space. Okay. This is that. All right. The feminine energy is the creative potential. This is the waters. This is the blackness of the void, that pure chaotic potential for creation or destruction. So with masculine energy, it's about containing. That's why when we as a society operate in toxic masculinity, then everything is about containment, control, and order. You'll typically see a lot of male leaders as well. You'll typically see a lot of go, 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 chase, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle energy. That's masculine. Light feminine is playful, childlike, princess like, motherly, unless it's expressed in its shadow side. But dark feminine energy is unbothered. Dark feminine energy is sovereign. Dark feminine energy is sexual. Dark feminine energy is like the crone, okay? The siren, the magician or witch, all right? And if you notice, when you watch a Disney movie, and I've talked about Disney movies before, when you talk about Disney movies, look at who is considered the hero or the heroine or the damsel in distress and who is considered the villain. Just now, we are starting to see that flipped a little bit because we're entering an age where people are starting to see that, nothing is true, all is true. There is no good, there is no evil. Like everything is like a frequency, everything is quantum, right? But for a very long time, people just saw things in black and white and they would categorize accordingly. And this caused a schism in the collective consciousness of the feminine. And this caused us to feel like, on one hand, I can either be the virgin or the whore, but I have to somehow be both for my husband. How the fuck is that possible? Right? I have to be a little of this, but I can't be too much of this. And I can't be too much of this, but I have to be a little of this. I have to have 8 arms to like handle all this shit, right? In the Disney movies, the original Disney movies, it was the light feminine that was considered good, and the dark feminine was considered evil. As we, as a collective consciousness, specifically, I'm talking about feminines, okay? We as a collective consciousness, as we are waking up, the external reality is mirroring that back to us. And that's why we're seeing movies like Maleficent. That's why we're seeing movies like Wicked. That's why we're seeing movies that are showing like Cruella de Vil's origin story. And they're saying, hey, these women aren't evil. They're just expressing their dark, divine feminine nature because they're pissed because they were fucking wronged. And yes, a dark, divine feminine can be the warrior, can be brutal, right? Can be vicious when she has to be. But in a general sense, she is unbothered, she is sovereign, she respects her boundaries and the boundaries of others. And she doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks. And the more she pours into herself, the more magnetic she becomes, the more powerful she becomes. So, what did we lose as women? Our fucking full sovereign power. The permission to be women as we were intended, because it was too fucking scary for the established order to think of the alternative of what things would happen or could happen if we were not being cut down to size. But this is shifting because as we wake up and we reclaim these parts of ourselves from within, the external reality of the collective consciousness is mirroring that back to us. So we can't control what anyone thinks of us, what anyone tries to do to us, but we can absolutely control the access. We can control what we allow to happen to us and who gets access to us. That is dark feminine energy. Specifically, what I'm talking about in my upcoming ebook, the Dark Feminine Codex, Rituals to Activate Siren, Succubus, and Vampire DNA. We're talking about the vampire. It's not what people think. The vampire archetype is the undead energy of the whole being killed and reborn in the sovereign image of the dark goddess and having impenetrable sovereign energetic boundaries, being unbothered. Any energy, negative or positive, becomes fuel, becomes food for her. Why do you think they are trying to keep us from this expression? Because who the fuck can do anything to you when anything done becomes fuel for your evolution, becomes transmutive properties for your personal alchemy. Because we understand that we can only control what we do, how we think, and how we feel. So, being a vampire is about emotional mastery. Succubus energy is about reclaiming that sexual alchemy, that sexual power that we as women naturally have. Men desire it, they want it. They want our feminine currency. We have that. And what they wanted to do, that I'm not talking about like men, okay? What the patriarchal system as a whole wanted to do was to control exactly how much of that we could have and to try to funnel it and use it for their advantage, because they didn't want us to have power over them. Think about it. If a woman has complete sovereign power over her sexuality, which she should anyway, but if she has that, what power does the masculine really have in that sense over her? Not to say that the masculine or feminine should ever try to overpower the other, but you get my drift. That can't be used against her. In fact, she becomes so powerful that it's scary, because not only can she not be manipulated, but she is so alluring, she is so sexually sovereign that every man is going to want her, but yet not be able to access her, which means what? That her femininity becomes sexual currency. She decides, and that gives her power. So the reason that, ladies, we get cast in these categories of either the virgin or the whore is neither of those categories has power in the way that they divide it, right? Who has power? The one who has awakened their tantric chi, their kundalini, their sexual essence, but doesn't give it away freely. So she could be celibate, or she could be as the sacred prostitutes of old, like selectively sharing that energy in order to help heal and activate the collective, help activate their kundalini. Or she could use it to feed back into herself, which could also mutually benefit those parties as well, men or women. Okay. Men benefit from feminine energy and feminine currency. And we know that women benefit from masculine energy and masculine currency. But that doesn't need to be fucking talked about, because that's not the part in society that has been repressed for thousands of years. So we're talking about the dark feminine aspect. So we've covered vampire, we've covered succubus. Let's talk about Siren. This is the magnetism aspect, because the more you pour into yourself, the more that you unlock your dark divine feminine nature, the more alluring and magnetic you become. That's the power of the Siren. She doesn't chase, she attracts, she allures. She has the power of glamour. So reclaiming the darkness that was demonized has to do with reclaiming all of ourselves, the parts that were repressed and considered unworthy, that were considered dirty, that were considered not societally acceptable. Reclaiming all of those parts and being like, this is who I am. I am fully woman. I am fully in the divine feminine. And I stand in my sovereign power. And I get to choose who has access to my energy and to my power. So if you guys want to reclaim what was stolen, pre-order my ebook. I go into specific rituals activations, exercises, guided journeys specifically for that purpose. It's only $9.99. Price goes up when I launch the ebook next month. Also comes with a free initiation activation to get you started. It is time for us to reawaken, reclaim our dark divine power, ladies. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for coming. Thank you for everyone participating in the chat. I know that I wasn't answering questions or commenting. This was definitely more of a channeled live. I will have other lives in the future where you can ask questions. If you are not already subscribed, please do so. Hit the notification bell if you would like to vote on future lives. This was a voted on live during the poll. You guys voted for this. If you want to vote for future videos, definitely do that. Check out my website, thetantricdragoness.com. I have lots of ebooks on there, guys. I have a masterclass coaching, whatever you want, whatever you need. All right. I love you all.